Hey guys, and welcome back to it now for something a little bit different. Episode 71. Mr. John Nance, welcome back, buddy. It's good to see you, my friend. How's your week going?
Hey, what's going on? It's going. It's over with, thank goodness.
I
But
know.
unfortunately, got another week to look forward to.
I
Y'all
know.
know what I mean.
Those Mondays just fucking sneak up on you, man. They they
Ugh.
just they just sneak up on you. Blink your eye. Well, today, guys, we hit episode 71, and we're going to take you. We went from the 80s last week with the Gate. Now we're taking you through our Dorff Fest, as I have unofficially called it, and we're going to take you to 2007 to talk about a really unusual hybrid, I'll call it, a film, because this combines horror, combines comedy, but there's also a heist element involved. I would say, not to go too deep into that yet, it's more comedy more than anything. But yeah, no. So we're talking about 2007 film called Botched. This is an interesting film, which I'm going to go into in a few minutes more. Before we do that, I figure we'll just talk about what we've been watching. So I guess I will let you go first, John. What have you been watching lately? Have you had
Oh,
anything?
nothing new. Just the scheduling and just, the feeling of going out to go see it, some of the movies just hasn't been right, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So been inside, watched a couple movies. I'm not going to say what they are because I want to keep the audience in suspense. Maybe a surprise.
Ooh.
But one of the other movies, because my wife, she knows I like watching, Don Lee movies.
Mm.
And so last night or the other night, we watched, I put on The Cop, The Gangster, and The Devil.
I've
And
seen that on my radar. It looks good.
oh, by the end, I was like, so what do you think? She was like, that was really good. And I
Mhm.
was like, and guess what? They're making a remake. Well, they're supposedly doing a remake with Don
Oh,
Lee
okay.
again. So she was like, okay, that's gonna be awesome. Yeah, so it's been kind of limited, keeping myself busy with some other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I finally finished up also Resident Alien. Oh, that show's so good. That show's so
Nice.
funny. And yeah, I mean, it hasn't been too much. What about you?
Yeah, no. So, just a quick question: did you finish up the newest season of Resident Alien? Is season four? Did they drop all of it at once, or is it like weekly? That
I haven't checked. After we finished season three, I knew season four was coming, so I never went back. And the
Oh,
way
okay.
things have been going lately, um, they like to drop it one episode at a time, which drives me nuts now,
Yeah,
which,
we get spoiled. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're spoiled. So I haven't checked, but I'm gonna have to check. And maybe they have. And if they have, yeah, that'll be next weekend rip through.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with Alan Tudyk, man. I mean, everything he does is wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, like yourself, I mean, I actually, because I have that A-list pass, I've seen quite a bit. I'm not going to talk about everything. So I did catch the How to Train Your Dragon remake. I caught that last weekend. And I'm going to go ahead and be a hypocrite because last weekend I was telling you guys about how remakes should be different and they should be interesting and they should add some new element. Well, this does not add any new elements. I mean, there's one or two scenes that's different. But here's what I will say. I will say, to clarify a little bit on what I said last week, even though it's almost a shot for shot remake, what's different is they keep the soul and the flavor from the original. So when I say that, the example I'll use is something like the Lion King remake they made, the live action one. What made that thing so weak was not the CGI animals or anything like that. It didn't have the heart and soul of the original. The animation also in the original was really amazing. It just didn't check off all the boxes. Whereas, well, this one was a live action remake. They really managed to capture the soul. Most of it's younger actors, like a guy named Mason Thames, who plays Hiccup. He was also in that horror film, which I didn't realize came out a couple of years ago with Ethan Hawke, Black Phone.
Yep.
He starred in that. And apparently, I just saw Black Phone. Apparently, they're making a sequel. I don't know
Yep.
how, because I thought Ethan Hawke died, but that's nor here nor there. Um, we have a young girl, Nico Parker, who's also an up and comer. She's playing the role of Astrid. And then, of course, we have Gerard Butler returning because he was also the voice actor. The original movies, he's returning for the father role, Stoic. And then good old Nick Frost shows up. So those are some of the main cast. This guy directed the three original films. I didn't realize that, and he also did the first Lilo and Stitch movie, the original. So he has a pretty good resume. And like I said, is it something that you have to see? If you love the animated ones, you're not going to be let down. Yeah, it is almost a shot for shot remake, but like I said, it does manage to keep the soul of it, the original, the source material, and they don't butcher it, which is something I like. They didn't just butcher it because it's always scary when they translate one way to the other, and you never know quite what you're going to get. But I thought it was worth it. I followed that up with, and I saw this a couple weeks ago. I saw Past Lives, which came out in 2023. It's on Netflix, and it's by director Celine Song. She did this film, and then she followed it up with a film that came out last week called The Materialists, which I believe Jose and our buddy
Oh
Mike
yeah.
the Wildebeest are actually covering. I think that'll be their new episode, which should be out probably today or tomorrow.
Yep. Folks,
Um,
check them out. Watch Skip Plus.
yeah, definitely check out Watch Skip Plus. And basically, the very premise of this is basically you have our two main leads. The actress's name is Greta Lee. She's playing the main role of Nora. And then you have another actor, and hopefully I don't screw this up, TU, who's playing the role of Hai Sung. And basically, they're childhood friends. They're living in South Korea. And she has to move with her family. I think her mom or dad got a new job. So she moves to America. She starts her life over. And years later, as an adult, she has this fully functional life as an adult. She's trying to become a writer. But she gets into a conversation with one of her friends, and somehow this childhood friend's name comes up in conversation. So they go down the rabbit hole of searching him on Facebook. And coincidentally, he was also looking for her. Their paths, for whatever reason, just didn't cross. So they kind of like reconnect, primarily through like Facebook chat and Zoom and things like that. And they get caught up on life. Also, backstory, when they were younger, they both kind of each had a crush on each other. They went on one date. All while this is happening, you know, she's having this back and forth with him, and she's in her early 20s. And you can see they're getting closer again, but neither of them are really in a position to visit one another. He's halfway across the continent, she's over there. So at a certain point, she realizes that she's becoming too, I guess, reconnected with this guy, but she needs to focus on her dreams of becoming a writer and just taking some time off. So she goes to this writer's retreat. She meets a guy. Lo and behold, they get married. Flash forward, I think a couple months later, she ends up reconnecting with her childhood friend. And eventually, he comes to America to visit for a week. And I don't want to give too much away. I've already given way too much away. But effectively, it's about these two people reconnecting as adults. And I don't want to give the ending away. It's not your typical what you would expect from this film. And when I say that, most films resolve based off what I'm telling you now. You would resolve in a very obvious, like, "Hey, I think I know where this is going," and it doesn't do that, which I like. Um, Unfortunately, her next movie, The Materialist, which I'll only cover briefly, that's the one that came out last week, follows a very similar formula, not quite exactly, but a similar formula, and unfortunately, it does resolve in a very Hollywood typical ending, which I was a little bit disappointed in. But I don't want to go too much into that. Instead, I will defer you to Watch Skip Plus with Jose and Mike the Wildebeest, because they're going to be releasing an episode talking about that, and they're going to go into a lot of detail about that film. And again, those are just a couple things I watched. I also watched Feds from 1988. I had never seen this. This is with Rebecca De Mornay, and who is the other actress? Bear with me, Mary Gross. And basically, it's a action comedy. Rebecca De Mornay plays a character named DeWitt. She is a former Marine. Mary Gross is her partner. They're basically going into the FBI school, the academy, to train to become part of the FBI. And Rebecca De Mornay is the tough as nails. social, strong, and Mary Gross's character, Janice, is more of like the nerdy type. And basically, it's their adventure surviving the school to become an FBI. And right off the get go, you know, especially during the 80s, people are very sexist. They only basically got in the program because they had to put a quota in. They had to have X amount of women in the program. So they have the odds stacked against them. And it becomes this fight to try to survive the program, graduate, and become, full FBI members. It's for the most part, pretty solid action comedy. The thing is, I always like a good action comedy. And I feel like when it comes to women, you don't get a lot of action comedies, which I always thought is disappointing. Like when I see this movie, I compare it to the movie I saw a couple of years ago with what's her name? Melissa McCarthy and Sandra Bullock, The Heat, which is like a typical. That's like I think they're cops, and that's like an action comedy. I think this might have been the predecessor for that. But you don't get enough good action comedies with women. So I thought, hey, let me check it out. And it was a solid little film. I definitely would check it out. It's a Tubi watch. So good old Tubi to the rescue. So you can check that out. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I watched. I did watch some other stuff, but I don't want to go into too much. So yeah, that's me for the week. So I guess that brings us to our actual film. Botched came out in 2007. This is an interesting film because it was conceived originally in 2003. That's when our director, Mr. Kit Ryan, came up with the idea, and he worked with his screenwriters. And it was originally conceived as a much darker film. But he realized, what? People like to laugh. And the way we're writing it now, it might not quite work as it's currently written. So they did a rewrite. It took a couple of years. They got their funding in place. And in 2007, this film came out. Now, I couldn't find a budget on this film, unfortunately. It didn't gross a lot. I think it got a very limited theatrical release. It played film festivals. When I discovered this movie, I discovered it at good old Blockbuster Video. They used to have their used section where you could buy. At the time, it was a bargain, guys. You could find DVDs like 4 for $5 or 5 for $20. Now you can buy DVDs for $1 or $2, used DVDs. But back then, that was a bargain. And I remember seeing the cover and being very attracted to it because you just see this guy and his head's on the ground and his blood splattered. And I'm like, oh, and it's got Stephen Dorff too. It's like that like shiny comic book cover that you see at the comic book shop with your favorite comic book artists, whether it's McFarlane or Eric Larson or whoever it is. You're just automatically attracted to it. So I picked it up, I rented it, and ahead of time, notice here, I absolutely adore this film. And I rented it and I loved it, Yeah, so Kit Ryan came from the UK. The film did gross $16,000, so it didn't gross a lot. Like I said, I think a lot of it was through rentals. He would follow this film up later on with a film called Dementomania, which was released in 2013. That is an okay film. I think it's not quite as strong as this one, personally. And then he had a film called Property of the State, which came out in 2016. And that's like a serious drama. And apparently it's based off a real life case about a guy that was a killer. Unfortunately, I can't find that movie anywhere, but I'm intrigued by it. Currently, he's in pre-production for a TV series called Fog of War. But like a lot of pre-production, there's no actual release date, So he hasn't done a ton of stuff, this guy, Kit Ryan. This was an interesting film from the production standpoint because this was a co-production between Australia, the UK, Germany, Ireland, and the USA, which I thought was kind of like really weird because you don't really see that too often.
Yeah, it was pretty wild to see who was involved.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. We have 3 different writers. We have 2 brothers, Raymond Friel. He's mostly done indie stuff. I did a film called The Calcium Kid, which came out in 2004. Of course, Boston 2007, and a film called Moondogs, which came out in 2016. And then his brother, whose name is Ian Friel, he did a film called Time Watch in '93, of course, Botched in '07. But beyond that, not really too much. And then we finally have a gentleman named Derek Boyle. He also worked on The Calcium Kid, worked on Bots, then he also worked on Moondogs. So that's a little bit about our writers. When we shift into the cinematography, we have a gentleman named Mr. Brian Loftus. Now, Brian has worked on interesting stuff here. He's worked on The Company of Wolves from '84.
Good
Um,
movie. Good
yeah,
movie.
that is a very good movie. He worked on Jake Speed, which came out in '86. He worked on a Madonna music video, believe it or not. Two of them. Like one that came out in '87 and one that came out in '90. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he did a little music video stuff. And he worked on the biopic. I can't think of the lead singer of Joy Division, but the lead singer of Joy Division, he had a movie
Yeah.
called Joy Division, and an interesting film. And he worked on that. So that's a little bit about there's some a little bit about our background for some of those guys. Are you familiar with any of these guys?
Brian Loftus, I just recognize his body of work again, Company of
Yeah,
Wolves.
yeah,
But it was interesting to see that the dominating media that he was really working in was music videos, especially with Madonna. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, there was another movie with, gosh, you mentioned Mornay. Who was the other lady?
from Mary Gross.
Ellen Barkin with a
Okay,
movie called Siesta. You know, it's one of
okay.
those, how did I end up here? What the hell's going on? I got to get the hell out of here type movies, which I thought, way back in the day, it was pretty decent. Yeah, the Friel brothers. Yeah, it was interesting to see their work. There was not a lot, and that was kind of what was surprising to me a little bit looking behind the camera. All the folks that were involved. It was just how limited. I don't want to say that because that's like negative, but just their scope of work isn't as grandiose as some folks. Like even with the composer, right? Tom
Yeah,
Green, you couldn't find a whole lot of his
yeah.
previous works, and you know, it,
I
it,
think
it was
what
it
it
was just
is,
interesting.
these are probably guys, if I were to guess, probably guys that probably either graduated from film school or maybe they worked on low budget, like no budget, homebrew films.
Yeah,
And this is probably early on in their career. So because of that, you don't have the same resources. You just got to work with what you have, and I think a lot
yeah,
of them were probably just really just kind of, what's the old expression, putting your, I can't think of the right phrase here, but basically, you're really just kind of really honing your craft,
yeah, and I think you're
nowadays.
exactly right because I had that same exact thought by the time I was done, like going back and looking at the behind the scenes. I was like, it's probably just a group of guys who were just like in a pub, like, hey,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
make this movie.
Oh, and before I move further with the credits, this is how disorganized I am, guys. I actually wrote a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. So I wanted to ask you two questions. First, John, what are some of your favorite horror comedy films when you think of horror comedy?
Oh, geez.
You don't have to give me what's the most important one. I can never do that. I just ones that you come to the top of your head. Which one are the ones that you connect with? The ones that you laughing your ass off every time you watch them.
You would put me on the spot, wouldn't you? Yeah.
And it is, I have my
So I
life
just
here.
he asked me a question which I'm probably gonna botch,
No,
pun
not at all.
intended.
Not at all.
Some of my favorites, and this is going way back in the day. I don't know how many folks remember this movie. It was a horror movie, um, Student Bodies.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah, '80s, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
80s, yeah.
yeah.
Student Bodies, Saturday the 14th.
Okay.
More recently, and I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a movie called Tucker and Dale versus Evil,
Well, they better. That's something that should be on everybody's
right? They
watch list.
better. That is a must watch for everybody. And of course, Handsome Guys, the remake retelling from the
Yeah,
Korean version, right? So from a long time ago, again, Student Bodies, there's just wow. I mean, you don't dare risk some of the avenues that they traversed
yeah.
because yeah, you just don't do it. But there's been a lot of successful ones. I will rank Botched later as we discuss it.
Oh no, I
With
remember
that,
this too, guys.
but yeah, I mean, as far back as like again, Student Bodies. Oh, another great horror comedy, sci-fi, I guess you could even.
Mm.
That really had me, start following James Gunn, Slither.
Oh, absolutely
You
fantastic
know what I
film.
mean? So that was another good one. So they're out there. There's some really bad ones, but there's some really good ones.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
So for me, and again, I had time to prepare. I did put you on the, I did put the pressure on you, John. I got
Oh,
to
my
slow
seat is hot.
down.
Oh, my seat is hot. What is going
I
on?
know exactly, but I feel like since we're talking about a horror comedy, I think it's relevant to talk about what our favorite horror comedies are. For me, it started with Bride of Frankenstein,
Ah,
because I think of the first film and the tonal difference between the first film and the second film. There are a couple moments in the first film where there's some levity there, but I feel like that second film, Bride of Frankenstein, is almost probably one of the first horror comedies because there's just so much humor sprinkled throughout that film. Um, just the rejection
yeah.
of him to finally getting his bride. But there's a lot of moments throughout that film that are just filled with little moments of comedy. Of course, The Little Shop of Horrors,
Yeah.
both of them, honestly. Even the original, people don't realize how much dark
Original's
humor is
great.
sprinkled
Yeah, that
in
one's
the Corman one.
that's one of the first like I remember like what do they classify black comedies?
Yeah, yeah.
Really, yeah.
And then obviously Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah.
Um, Evil Dead 2, I think is perfect because Evil Dead 2 is probably of that trilogy is probably my favorite only because it really does blend the horror because there are some really freaky, horrific moments in that film.
Yeah.
But then there are some really like, oh my God, I'm fucking laughing my ass off kind of moments in that
Oh my
film.
God. Yeah. I mean, that kind of I mean, shit, let's go back even further, right? Abbott
Oh yeah.
Costello movies, Meet
Oh yeah.
Frankenstein, Meet the Wolfman. Evil Dead 2 was in a similar vein, right? Where you have these moments of, oh my gosh, and then there's just that one moment of humor, and it's just like, oh my God, that's so awesome.
And of course, I have to have the last couple on here. I have Reanimator because I love Reanimator,
Yeah.
especially the first one. The second and third, about. I mean, they're watchable, but the first one's it's awesome. Of course, Toxic Avenger, love
Yeah.
some Toxie. I have a New Zealand film. I think it's either New Zealand or Australia. I want to say New Zealand. Black Sheep. That is a
Oh,
great movie.
yes.
That's another one that's a little bit more underrated. And then, of course, I have Society by Brian Usna, another '80s film, which I think really is a lot darker, but there is definitely a tone of that humor that's sprinkled throughout the film. So
Oh, yeah.
those are a couple. And then I'm going to put you on the spotlight one more time, John.
Oh,
Okay, so this next question is specifically about the heist element of the film. So, what are your favorite, not just heist films, but films that follow the idea of one last job and I'm out? That fill that formula. It's like he's got. I mean, it could just be a heist movie. It doesn't have to be that formula. But if there's any that come to your mind, I think that is kind of like a subgenre of the heist movie. You know?
yeah. It's hard to classify, right? Because we talked last episode about Dorff and his hits and misses, and with
Yeah,
heist films like that, it's I find tend to be more misses
yeah.
than hits, so they don't really stick with me. But there are some with Denzel and geez, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. Inside Man.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes. That
Yeah,
was
that's
Mike
a
Wade.
good one. Yeah, of course, the movie, The Heist.
Yeah,
Um, gosh, if you even want to, expand that type of formula, like, one last time, then you got to go with Cage and Connery and The Rock, right? Because
yeah,
that's his one last time. That
yeah,
was pretty good. But in terms of like standing out, I think one of the I mentioned earlier, Inside Man was one of those I thought was like brilliantly done. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Because at the very end, when they do the reveal, and you're like, holy crap.
yeah.
That's actually pretty genius.
Yeah, that's a great
Um,
film.
yeah, so so that's about it for me,
Yeah.
honestly. How about you?
So for me, and again, I'm cheating because I did prepare this ahead of time. So I kind of have a little bit, and I realize that I have baby. I know, I'm a fucker. I get told I'm a fucker almost every day. Fucker, asshole, dipshit. And trust me, it gets used on a daily basis. Um, Baby Driver is one that I adore.
That's
That
a good one.
you're right. I love Baby Driver. One that people don't think about too often, and I'm not a big fan of Wes Anderson. Over the years, he's kind of really soured on me, Wes Anderson, but I do like the Fantastic Mr. Fox.
That's a good one.
I have, of course, Heat. Um, I have the score. Of course, like yourself, I have the town. And Drive even, I love Drive, man. I
Oh yeah, that
do a
was good.
rewatch of that. So those are a couple that I thought about that came to mind when I think of the subgenre of the heist film, and I think about the one last job and I'm out.
Yeah.
All right, I'm
Oh,
gonna
I'll
get
tell you another one. I don't know if you've seen it recently. Jason Statham, Operation Fortune, Ruse
yes,
to Give.
yes, that's excellent.
That was actually highly entertaining. That was really good.
That's the guy Ritchie. I want to say it right.
It was Guy Ritchie, Jason Statham, Aubrey Plaza, uh, just Hugh Grant. It was just a good movie.
Yeah,
Good
that's
heist movie.
yeah. I mean, I'll watch anything by Guy Ritchie, man. He. Some of his stuff might be missed, but I'd say you what, most of his stuff is hit, man. He makes an entertaining popcorn film. I mean,
He's he's definitely one of those directors who has learned from past mistakes, Madonna.
yeah.
But yeah, he puts out good stuff. I can't deny that.
I can't think of the one he did. I think it came out the same year as that one. It's the one with Alan Richardson. Remember Alan Richardson from that show Reacher, the Amazon Prime show?
Oh yeah.
It's like it's basically like a it's almost like a Dirty Dozen or
the
you know which one I'm talking about. It's Alan Richardson, Henry Cavill's in it.
Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Yes,
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
two in 1 year, man. They're both bangers.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, back on track here. Editing. We got a guy named Jeremy Gibbs. He also worked on our director's next film, Dementimania. He worked on a film called The Hatching, which came out in 2014. And again, he teamed up for our director's third film, excuse me, Property of the State, which came out in 2016. He also did stuff like Max Cloud, which came out in 2020, and The Loneliest Boy in the World, which came out in 2022. So that's a little bit about our editor.
Well, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to go
Yeah,
back
no,
because
no.
if you really dig into his filmography, this was a guy, he may not have been leading the charge, but he's touched on a lot of films that I know people have watched and remember. Dune from 1984. He worked on that movie. He worked with Jackie Chan, people,
Oh,
around the world in 80 days with Coogan and Jackie
nice.
Chan. Um, how many people remember the movie Willow?
I love Willow, man. Willow is
Yeah, he
fantastic.
worked on that, and Tom Selleck. I thought it was one of the best movies he put out, Mr. Baseball. So this guy's
Yeah.
he's learned from a lot, and I'll jump ahead a little bit with Botched. I thought he did really well,
Yeah.
right? So his resume, his experience. I think he really did a great job editing this particular movie in Botched.
Yeah. No, absolutely. For sure. And I'm wondering, did he work on was he editing on those other films or is he doing like production stuff? I'm wondering because I know
He was just one of the many editors on the
oh okay.
teams, right?
Oh
I
okay, I
think I
got
think
you.
the only one he was first director on, I want to say was Mr. Baseball.
Oh okay, I got
I
you.
want to say that, but the opportunity to work on films like that, right? It's
Yeah,
it's
no, that's
it's
awesome,
it's
man.
it's good experience.
Yeah. Next we have our composer, Mr. Tom Green. No association with the other Tom Green. Although it'd be funny if all of a sudden we found out Tom Green was a composer on the side.
Wow.
But he did not too much. He did a TV movie in 2002 called Forever Ealing, Botched in 2007, and then something called Tracks and Trails in 2010. So not a ton. I will say I love the soundtrack to this
It's
movie.
great. It's great.
It's there's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now, when we get to our cast, obviously last week, for those that didn't listen to last week's episode, number one, shame on you. Go back
Yeah.
and
Shame.
watch the game.
Shame.
We're going to shame you into watching all of our
If I
episodes.
had a bell, I'd ring it and yell shame every time, like in, Game of
Exactly.
Thrones. Shame.
But if you haven't, for some reason, watched last week's episode, and again, shame on you, but I'm going to give you a quick rundown on Mr. Dorff. And I'm only going to give you a couple of things because we figure most people are familiar with Dorff. Blade in 98. He's widely known for Divinity, which came out in 2023, which I haven't seen yet, but it stars Scott Bakula, and I love me some Quantum Leap. So I got to watch Divinity. The Gate, obviously, we talked about. True Detective. He did the Leatherface film that came out in 2016, I want to say, and of course the Iceman. So those are a couple things that you might be familiar with. Obviously, the guy has a huge resume, and we did go over that more in depth last week. Next, we have playing the role of, I'll call the possible romantic lead, Jaime Murray playing the role of Anna. She's from the UK. And this one, she actually kind of surprised me because when I was watching this the first time I watched it, I was like, I know her from somewhere. And lo and behold, when I go onto the world of Internet Movie Database, it's Dexter's. I want to say season 4. She played a really twisted, dark role in Dexter season 4. That was back when Dexter was still really good before
Yes.
they totally shit the bed. Because
Yeah.
the first 4 seasons of that show were great, and then from there it just kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
it was like a plane crash, guys. But she also pops up in another film, a horror film called The Deaths of Ian Stone in 2007. She pops up in Fright Night 2. Now, when I say Fright Night 2, I say the one that came out in 2013, which is a follow up to the one that Anton was in.
Anton Yelchin, yeah.
Yeah,
And that was direct to video too, right?
Yeah,
I don't think
that's
they got a
direct to
theater
video.
yeah. But that was actually decent. I
Yeah, it
liked it.
was. Yeah, and then believe it or not, and I haven't watched this animated. I know it's been on Netflix for a while, but she's in the Castlevania
Yeah.
Netflix show. She was in like 28 episodes of that. She was also been in a lot of TV stuff like Gotham, and there's a whole list of stuff. But
Yeah.
I don't want to list her entire
Yeah,
resume.
she's done a lot. But yeah, Gotham, she plays was it Nissa Al Ghul?
Oh yeah,
Oh
nice.
yeah. So
I have to watch
it's
Gotham.
yeah,
Everybody
it's
says
yeah, everyone tells me I have to watch it. And I'm like, you're not the boss of me, but okay, I'll end up watching it.
I'll tell you what I did watch Batman related, and I don't know if I talked about it on the show. I don't think I did, but I will say that HBO Max, The Penguin with
I hear a
Colin,
lot of good things about that. Yeah.
it really is. It's one where you can drink the Kool-Aid and go, okay, they got it right. Everybody's talking about it, and there's a reason everybody's talking about it. That's a great show. So that's worth checking out. Uh, Following up next in our cast, we have a lady named Bronagh Ghallager. She's playing the role of Sonya, and I won't give too much away now. I'll save it, but it's an interesting role. She pops up in a ton of stuff, and I was in shock by how much stuff she pops up in. She pops up in stuff like Pulp Fiction, Mary Riley, Star Wars Phantom Medicine. Star Wars Phantom Menace. I can make words today, guys. I promise. She pops up in Sherlock Holmes in '09 with Robert Downey.
Yep.
And the list goes on and on. She's one of these people that, again, I saw her and I'm like, I kind of recognize her, but I'm trying to place where I recognize her. Um,
Yeah, she's also a prolific Irish. She's from Ireland, and she also has a pretty solid recording or musical career. She's
oh,
got a voice
okay.
on her. So
Oh, interesting. I'll have to
yeah,
look it up. Check out some music. I'm always down for some new music. Um, Next, we have playing her brother, we have a gentleman named Mr. Edward Baker-Duly. And again, guys, he's an interesting character, and I can't wait to go into him. Uh, he's been in stuff like, believe it or not, Grand Theft Auto 5. He did voice characters for that. The TV show Blacklist. Again, another video game, Red Dead Redemption 2.
yep,
Rockstar's got some love for this guy.
yeah, they do.
The Boys in the Boat, which I think that came out a couple of years ago. I want to say
Yep.
George Clooney directed that one. And then Blackwater Lane, which came out in 2024. So these are some films that you might be familiar with his work from.
Yeah, and if you're a horror fan, you might have seen him in another movie called oh gosh, I'm Rob Schneider's The Circle. It's like a circle. It's a horror movie, and they're actually filming a sequel to that.
Oh,
My
okay.
understanding coming out, I think next year.
Oh,
But
nice.
and I saw it. It's pretty decent.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Um, Now the next guy, he only has a small role. He pops up in the beginning and he pops up in the end, but he's a pretty popular character actor. Um, Sean Pertwee, he plays a Russian mob boss, a guy named Mr. Grozny. Basically, I only wrote a couple things because again, I didn't want to go through his entire resume. He's, I think, one that genre fans will know, Dog Soldiers in '02.
Oh yes.
Um, a sci-fi film that nobody talks about, and I think it's probably because it was probably overshadowed by The Matrix, but he did a movie called Equilibrium, also came out in '02. And I think it's a pretty solid film. That's another one thing I got dumped direct to video. It
Yeah.
probably isn't a perfect film, but I think it's a pretty cool film. And I think it's him and Christian Bale.
Yeah, Christian Bale.
That's
It's kind of like kind of another retelling of 451, wasn't it? If I remember it
kind of,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's got like that. It's got some Matrix vibes to it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
got a couple of things going on, but it's worth checking out. And then one of my all-time favorite horror films, because I love genre films that combine different things. So part of the reason I love this film, and again, I'm playing my hand early, is because you get the hybrid of a horror comedy, but then you get a little bit of a heist going on too. So this next film that he did is Event Horizon, and I love Event Horizon. That came out in '97, and you
Oh,
can't
that
go wrong
movie's
with it.
terrible.
God damn it, John!
I'm just kidding. That movie's awesome.
You got science fiction and you got horror, man.
Yeah. That
That's what.
movie's that movie was amazing.
Yeah, I love that movie, dude. Some really good performances. And then, obviously, if you're gonna go for the perfect double feature, you should watch Event Horizon and then pair it with Danny Boyle's film Sunshine. And then you got
Sunshine.
you got the perfect sci-fi horror combo
Yeah.
rocking.
And I will say I loved him in with Kurt Russell in Soldier. That was
Oh, Soldier, yes, you can't go wrong with that.
yeah, that was a good movie.
So next we have Mr. Jamie Foreman, who's playing a really obnoxious, goofy, but goofy all at the same time, the Russian mob character named Peter. And he's been also another guy. Again, I didn't know this guy had such a stacked resume. He's been in the movie Elizabeth with Kate Blanchett, which came out in '98. Sleepy Hollow, so he's worked with Tim Burton. Layer Cake, so he's worked with Matt Reeves and
Oh yeah.
Oliver Twist, Inkheart, and the list goes on and on. So he's got a nice little resume there.
Yeah, he is there's another one I found. I never heard of it before, but I gotta find it now. It's called Rise of the Foot Soldier
Okay,
Vengeance.
nice.
And they are filming a sequel to that, so apparently it did well. So just double down. I gotta go find that movie.
Yeah, definitely, man. It sounds interesting. The title alone is definitely intriguing.
Oh yeah.
Sounds like it's up my alley. Um, Followed next up in our cast, we have a gentleman named Russell Smith who's playing Yuri, who's the other character's brother. And he's another interesting character. He hasn't done quite as much. He was in a movie with Brian Cox, which came out in 2002 called The Escapist. Also, Becoming Jane, which came out in 2007, and then a film called Bloom, which came out in 2003. So not a lot in his resume, but I think what works for me, again, and I won't give too much away, is everybody has their moment in this film, and he has a couple interesting moments, and I'll just leave it like that for right now. Next, we have a gentleman named Geoff Bell, who plays Boris, a security guard. He's been in stuff like I'll Sleep When I'm Dead in '03, which I love. Clive Owen masterpiece, gentlemen. Check that out. Girl with a Pearl Earring, which came out in '03 also. Scoop in 2006. Stardust, '07. Rock and Rolla.
Rock and Rolla.
Guy Ritchie in '08.
Oh, yeah.
War Horse in 2011. So he worked with Spielberg. And then, of course, he also worked with Kit Ryan again in 2013 for Dementomania. Oh, he also pops up. Here we go. Can't forget mentioning Rogue One in 2016, because let's face it, if you're a Star Wars fan, that's one of the better in my opinion, new Star Wars films.
No, absolutely. And I will say too, for those who have you can check it out on Prime.
Yep,
Um
I know where we're going.
he's in a very I loved the show. I thought it was great. He's in a little English mobster show called Mobland with Tom Hardy. And he plays one of the titular characters in there, Ritchie Stevenson. It's worth checking out.
It's funny. I was looking at the credits, and I saw that. I'm like, hey, I think you mentioned that last week, and I was
Yeah,
like, I gotta check that
yeah,
out.
I did. It's
Yeah,
great.
nice. Next, we have a gentleman named Hugo Connor playing Dimitri, who's kind of like this shy office worker. He doesn't pop up in a ton of stuff, but again, he pops up in some interesting stuff. His career goes back to '86, Rawhide Rex. There you
Yeah.
go. Uh,
Yeah.
but then he does some stuff like with why can't I think of the guy that was
Daniel Day-Lewis.
yes, My Left Foot. Yes, My
Yeah.
Left Foot. He did Three Musketeers, the '93 version with Charlie Sheen and was it Charlie Sheen? No,
Yeah.
yeah,
No.
yeah,
No, it was, right?
yeah.
Charlie
Charlie
Sheen.
Sheen, Keith Sutherland,
Yeah.
and Chris O'Donnell.
Chris
Uh,
O'Donnell.
he shows up in Chocolat in 2000. Also, Property of the State in 2016. Other directed by Kit Ryan. Pilgrimage, which came out in 2017, and Mary Shelley, which came out in 2017. So again, I could focus on everybody in this film, guys, but I didn't want to focus on everyone. I wanted to focus on our main cast. So that's what I did. Now, what's interesting about the script is it's funny because when I read a little bit of production stuff because I was curious and I did a little bit of homework, not too much because I don't want to be accused of getting any good grades and do too much homework.
Nerd.
You know what I mean? Just enough to get by. And it's interesting because, like I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, this whole idea was conceived in '03, but it was originally conceived as a much darker script, and they decided to change it because they felt like the original script was just too dark, and they figured by putting some moments of levity, it would probably hit better, and it kind of works a little better. So this is part of an interview from 2003, and it's with Kit Ryan, and he goes, well, I was involved with the film back in 2003, and the initial film was very dark, but it did have some absolute moments of genius to do with the humor. The characters came out brilliantly, but ultimately I found it to be too sick and twisted. So I decided to go back and do some rewrites, and hopefully now there's a larger audience to go see something like this. It's not the tongue-in-cheek with the blood and guts, but it isn't a spoof either. And then there's a moment here. Just bear with me for 1 second. One more quote here. When he was talking to Stephen Dorff on the set of the film, he basically Stephen Dorff would come up to him and he said, "Hey, you used to say to me quite a bit, where's my funny lines?" And I'd say, "You don't need any funny lines. You're funny because you're in the middle of all this chaos." So Stephen Dorff's character is basically, again, I'm going to go into the script in a second, but basically he's a guy that's a criminal, and he basically has one last job, and he can't fuck it up. And every character in this movie is just a whack job in their own way. And Stephen Dorff is the straight man trying to keep his shit together and just trying to survive and get done with this one last job. And that's a little bit of lead into the actual script, which I will get to right now. And keep in mind, guys, I'm giving you quite a lot of the script. It's not beat per beat. There are some things that I may leave out. I do want to leave some of the appeal for you guys to go track this down. This film, if you want to pick it up on DVD, you can pick it up on DVD, buy it used. You can find it very cheaply. Yep. If you don't want to pay anything at all, just go to Hoopla, guys. You can download that onto your phone, your tablet, and you should be able to screencast that to your TV, and that won't cost you anything. So you can find this film for free. Anyway, enough of that. Into the script. It opens up, and we're introduced to our main character, Ritchie Donovan. And Ritchie Donovan's a professional thief, and he's indebted to a mob boss named by the guy's name is Grozny, who's played by Mr. Sean Pertwee. And basically, he's indebted to this guy because we find out that effectively years ago, this guy helped smuggle Ritchie Donovan's family in from Russia to America, and he's kind of taken on the debt. So the film opens up, and we see Ritchie. He's with these other two nameless thugs. They're inside like this art gallery, and they're trying to pull off this big jewelry heist. And unlike most heist movies, I don't know how familiar you guys are with heist movies. I'm sure you've seen this trope before. All heist movies have to have a moment where things fall apart, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be interesting. And it's all about having the introduction to our characters, having the shit go south, and having them try to figure out how they're going to fix things. That's basically the way most heist movies are done. Now this, almost goes off perfectly. So right off the get-go, as a viewer, I'm automatically suspicious. They get their stuff, they get in their car, and we're just thinking as the viewer, like, whoa, well, that was kind of smooth and easy. Now, mind you, this is only the first like 3 minutes of the film. This is where things take a turn, guys, and things just go to shit. We see our three thugs, so two thugs and Ritchie, who's chilling in the car. And Ritchie comments, "Hey man, why were you in such a rush? We had plenty of time." And he's like, "Well, we got to get back to the hotel because breakfast stop continental breakfast ends at 11 a.m." So, they're eating their own shit, like they're full of themselves, and they think they're the shit. And by watching this up to this point, we think they're the shit too. They pulled off this heist masterfully. They grab the diamonds, but of course, because it's a heist movie, there has to be that moment where things go to shit. So they're driving along down the road, and what happens? We see a lady with her dog, and she pulls out at the last moment. And to avoid killing her, they get into a car accident, and everybody's dead except for our main man, Ritchie Donovan. Now, Ritchie Donovan doesn't care about these two thugs. He checks to see if there's a pulse. He realizes they're dead. He grabs the bag of diamonds, and we see he's running down the street. And we're like, oh, okay, well, like he managed to survive a car accident. He managed to pull off this heist. And we're like, okay, good for him. No, 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 my friends. He gets further down the street, and now he gets hit by a car. He goes flying into the air. The briefcase full of diamonds fly everywhere. And all of a sudden, we just see him like take off because he realizes at this point he hears sirens. He's not going to sit there and pick up every diamond off the ground and pack them into the briefcase. So he goes back to his Russian boss, Groznia, and he's trying to explain this guy, this mob boss. And he's trying to explain it to him like a logical human being would. He's like, listen, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. He's trying to explain him this story. And all Grozny says is, what is the end result? What happened? What did you get? Did you bring me nothing? And I'm doing a horrible accent. I realize that. And he's like, yes, I got you nothing, but this is what happened. I don't want to hear it. You fucked up, and he's basically showing him through the grinder here. So he's like, I give you one more job. You do this one job, and then we're even. So Ritchie's not happy, understandably so. He goes, you're going to Russia. You're going to steal this artifact. And, he goes to Russia. And, of course, right off the get-go, he's getting off the airport. And he's freezing cold. You can see his breath as he's breathing. And we're introduced to his new two accomplices. Now, these guys are brothers. We're introduced to Peter. And Peter is basically one of these guys that you meet, probably dealt with it at some point in your life. That, I like to call it the Napoleon complex. He's one of these guys that's not too big. He probably drives a fancy car or a hot rod to compensate for a little penis, but he's got like a hard on. He's one of these guys that's got a hard on. And I'm not talking about the erect kind. I'm talking about the guy that just walks with that swagger, but he's probably a pussy, and he compensates it by acting like he's tough. That's Peter in a nutshell. We probably all went to high school with a Peter or someone similar to like this kind of personality. But he's a Russian Peter right there, this guy. We've all met a Peter character. And then we have his brother, Yuri. And Yuri is this kind of shy, thin guy, kind of nervous, but he seems like a genuinely good-hearted person. And these are the two guys that are going to help him pull off the next heist, the heist to redeem himself. Basically, they're there to go to this building to get this artifact. And what this artifact is like this gold cross. It looks like it's a couple hundred years old. And of course, because it's a heist movie and because this guy has shit luck, this too also goes to shit. Basically, we see them going up the elevator. We see them go into the room to grab the stuff he's got to get. And the next thing you know, they're racing out the door to get to the elevator. And Dimitri is covered in blood, and Ritchie's upset. Peter's upset. They try to catch an elevator, and basically the whole time Dimitri's going, why does he do that? Why did he kill that woman? He did not have to kill that woman. And Ritchie's like, you're right. He didn't have to kill that woman. Your brother's a fucking idiot. And he's like, yes, he's going to blame me. I'm always the one that gets the blame. He always tries to blame me. And basically, you have this chaos of Dimitri, this character Dimitri is having like a nervous breakdown. Ritchie's trying to be the glue that keeps this shit together. and they're trying to just catch the elevator and get down so they can get the fuck out of here. While this is happening and they're having this conversation, the door keeps on opening for the elevator, and more people keep on loading into the elevator. Meanwhile, these people are loading into the elevator, and the Peter character, who, like I said, has the Napoleon complex, he's fucking, you get off the elevator. You get off the elevator. And he's, at first, he's like nice about it, like he tries to be, but then he's like, you get the fuck off the elevator now. But they're not listening. So effectively, they stop at a floor, and they get off the elevator, and they realize that the elevator door shuts, and basically they're stuck on the 13th floor. And they realize at this point that they're kind of fucked, because Ritchie and Peter and Dimitri realize that they don't know what they're going to do because they can't get back on the elevator. They're contacted by what they think, we'll just say the police. And the police basically says, hey, listen, you're not going to get out of here unless you work with us. And basically the police tell them that, like, hey, here's what we want you to do. We want you to use the other passengers. We want you to, one by one, when we tell you to bring the other passengers out to the elevator. And Richie's like, okay, well, we'll kind of negotiate. We'll start with one. He doesn't want to give up everybody because he's afraid he's not going to be able to get out. So they arranged to free the first hostage. And they bring this guy. He's not really named, I don't think, in the script, because he's only in it for a minute. Hint, hint. He brings him to the elevator, and basically these giant scissors pop out of the elevator, and they basically snap his head off. And you just see the head drop to the ground. So at this point, basically, we're introduced to the rest of the passengers more deeply. I mean, we saw them in the elevator, but we weren't really introduced to all the main characters. We were introduced to three religious people: Sonia, Helena, and Katerina. And they're all part of like this Christian sect, although the way they behave, it seems more cultish than Christian-like. But that's a judgment on my part. Maybe I'm a fucking horrible human being and I'm judging religious people. I always think any people that gather together in a church every Sunday are probably more of a cult than a religious sect. But anyway, that's a whole other story. And then we're introduced to Anna, who's a corporate executive, Dimitri, who's a young guy going in for an interview, and Boris, who's another badass, or at least he thinks he's a badass, and he's basically the part of the security there. And he's one of these guys that reads army and military magazines, and another one that thinks like, he thinks he's a fucking badass. He thinks he's watched Rambo one too many times, and he thinks like, he can take on the world. Someone forgot to tell him that he's a security guard. So that's our basic setup. Before I go any further, what are your thoughts as you're watching this for the first time, John? This is your first time watching this, right? I think, or had you seen this before?
No, this is first time watching this movie called Botched. I tell you, this movie, it start off, it's like you said, he say magic word, right? It's too easy. It was, right? It start off. I'm sorry, folks. I just had to, because that was one of the first things that like really tripped me out about this movie. Knowing this cast is primarily English
Yeah.
and Irish, and they start whipping out their version of the Russian accent that they use. It was like, holy God, bože moi, these people. Off the get-go, yeah, it was like, okay, I'm digging this. Yeah, Ritchie he's that really brilliant thief who gets caught up in the most unbrilliant ways of hip deep in crap. And the characters, as you start to get them introduced, the poor guy at the elevator is like, as soon as the elevator opens up, right, it's like pitch black. I'm like, oh yeah, he's gone. And sure enough, the scissors come out, and he gets a little taken off the top, if you know what I mean, folks.
Oh yeah.
But then yeah, they come back, and it's just great. And I think what really started hooking me in to really interest me in to see what the rest of the movie was, as you said, I am Boris, alpha male. It's like,
Exactly.
what the? You said Rambo, right? But I think about that time it was what Dolph Lundgren, what was it,
Yeah,
Red Scorpion?
yeah,
I am alpha male. And he's
yeah,
just like, what is going on? And it's just they set it up, I think, pretty good, right?
yeah.
In terms of what happens now? What happens now? And, I think you'll just go continue on because we're going to
Yeah,
find out
no, I don't
what
want to. I
happens
don't want to get
now.
too much away, but I also wanted to get your input just at this point, what you were thinking, because I had the same thoughts up to this point. I was like, man, this is just, I love the momentum of this film. It doesn't stop for a second. So basically, after the group hears about the death in the elevator, and at first, Ritchie and Yuri and Peter, at first they're trying to hide it, like they're trying to be covert about it because they don't want to freak everybody out. But they hear about it, and of course they're automatically thinking it's the mobsters. They're thinking it's Richie, Yuri, and Peter that killed this guy. And when they do find out, they find out, and I think the best way possible. You literally see this character that pops out throughout the entire movie. And the best way to compare this character is if we all seen what's that golf movie from the '80s that everybody loves, Caddyshack.
Caddyshack.
If you guys remember what is it, the golf? What is it, the beaver or the golf? What's the animal?
The gopher.
The gopher. Okay, so if you
Hey,
remember,
gopher.
what's the animal that was in that? Was it a beaver that kept
No, it
on
was
popping up?
gopher. It was
Oh, it was a
gopher.
gopher. Yeah. Okay, it
Yeah.
was a gopher. Okay, so that's what it was. I don't know why my brain farted there for a second, but it does. My brain farts a lot, guys. Not as much as my ass, but it does tend to fart almost as equally. So we see as Richie, Peter, and Yuri are trying to calm these people down and go like, "No, we didn't kill him, man. We didn't kill him." And of course, they don't believe him. We see a rat drag this giant-sized rat. This rat is the size of a small dog. Well, those small obnoxious dogs that every neighbor's got to have one of those small obnoxious dogs. Well, this rat looks like it's a fucking New York City rat, but bigger. And it's fucking dragging this head along, and they're going, "What in the actual fuck is going on here?" So, basically that's what they see. And at this point, the group realizes that okay, maybe Richie isn't lying. Maybe there's something more going on than just it's more than just a hostage negotiation. And the group kind of splits off into different factions. We get, of course, the three religious people: Sonia, Helena, and Katerina. Sonia being the main head of that religious group, and then we find Yuri, um, the brother. He ends up joining them because basically what ends up happening is he's having a meltdown because Peter's like yelling at him. Um, like I said, he's asking Richie if he can eat a sandwich. He's like, "Can I just eat my sandwich?" And Richie's looking at him like, "What the fuck are you talking about? I don't have a fucking sandwich." And he's like, "No, I brought my sandwich. Can I eat it, please?" And he's like, "I don't fucking care what you do." So this poor Yuri guy, he's having a meltdown. You can see he's been bullied by his brother his entire life. And he starts chewing down on his sandwich. And of course, this Sonya character, she's like praying with this girl, Helena and Katerina. And she kind of sees that he's kind of weak. And she pulls him over and she's like, you come with us. And the next thing you know, he's sitting there and they're all sitting there in the corner and they're sitting there praying, and he's kind of joined them, I guess, at this point. And then we see Dimitri. Like I said, Dimitri is this shy office guy, kind of like Yuri, but not really. He's a guy that went in for an interview. We find out his story. He's someone that went in for an interview. He does voiceover work. He's worked in like doing like volunteer work for like doing radio work at the hospital, like making announcements and stuff like that. So we're introduced to him. Then we're introduced to Anna, who's an office executive. And like I said, we're introduced to Boris, the security guard. Um, Now,
Boris alpha male.
Boris Alpha Men. So next, we cut to chaos ensues as the Christian group managed to get a hold of one of the guns because, unfortunately, good old Yuri, while he's a nice guy, isn't the smartest. So she basically Sonya manages to grab a gun from Yuri. And then when Yuri's brother Peter comes in, she manages to point the gun at him, take him by surprise, and get his gun. So this is going on. Meanwhile, while this is happening, she takes Yuri, after that happens, she takes Yuri to a secret room where we meet a wild armored man named Alex. And Alex, the only way to describe Alex is he looks like somebody that could have lived 200 or 300 years ago. He literally looks like a wild barbarian. And he's waiting there anxiously to sacrifice poor Yuri. Uh, Sonya and Alex basically get in an argument, and we kind of see that there's some sort of connection between these two characters. But right off the get go, it isn't quite established right away. And basically, they're arguing about who gets to kill him. So right off the get go, we know that there's something up with Sonya, and whoever this guy that she's talking to is also a little bit, has a few loose screws because he's dressed up like a barbarian. And like I said, they're arguing about who gets to kill this poor guy. But Yuri's not a complete and total idiot because he sees while they're arguing, this is a moment where he can take off. So he takes off, and it almost becomes like a Tom and Jerry cartoon as he's taking off down the hallway. They see that he's gotten off, and they're like, "Oh, you idiot! You let him go!" So they chase after him, and just when poor Yuri, we think he's gotten away, he steps on a floor panel, and this is where things get really weird. A disco ball drops down, and we hear some like funky music, and basically these spikes pop up from the ground, or no, out of the ceiling, excuse me, and he's instantly killed. Um, Meanwhile, again, a lot of cutting back and forth. There's a lot of stuff going on in this film, guys. In the chaos of this, Ritchie and the rest of the hostages find the body of Yuri, but not before killing one of the people in that religious group, a girl named Katerina. They all know that at this point something's going on, but they haven't quite pieced everything together yet at this point in the script. Ritchie and the survivors discover Alex's lair. We see this room, and it's this security room, and it's filled with security cameras, a microphone, it's got a computer, and they basically at this point realizes this is the people they've been talking to. Not that they didn't have suspicions already, but they realize they're monitoring their every move, and they realize, oh shit, if they haven't figured out already that things are gone down the shitter, they realize things are really continuing to go roll down this shit hell further and further. They see a picture on the wall, and we see Alex, the barbarian character, and we see Sonya, the leader of that sect, and we realize they're twins, and they make that realization, and they see a little article about how apparently they're descendants of Ivan the Terrible. So this is where the association of that main character, Alex, the guy that looked like a barbarian, now this is where it pieces it together. Well, this is why he's dressed like Ivan the Terrible. For whatever reason, he's got an obsession with his ancestor, and I guess he thinks he's going to be the next Ivan the Terrible. They come to the realization the only way they're going to get out of this place is by fighting, because they're stuck. The police don't know they're here, and there's only going to be one way out. Now that's they fight their way out. So Ritchie and Anna decide to pursue Alex. Meanwhile, Boris and Dmitri team up, and they try to set a trap. And of course, because Boris is a wannabe and Dmitri doesn't know what he's doing, they set up a very poor trap. And again, I always keep on going back to cartoon, but even though it's a horror comedy heist film, it very much has a very cartoonish element. They set up a trap that reminds me of something I'd see from Tom and Jerry. They have a doorway, and above the doorway, there's like a meat cleaver, almost like a meat cleaver. That's a trap. It's basically attached to the top of the doorway by a rope. So pretty much like the idea would be if someone were to open the door, the meat cleaver would go through their head and it would basically kill them. Hence like a Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes kind of like premise setup. And they're reading this in one of Boris's magazines. Boris has one of these military magazines, and they're consulting it, and they're going, "What do you think, Dmitri? Does it look all right to you?" And he's like, yes, I think it looks okay. So that's going on. They have their own strategy. Like I said, Anna and Ritchie decide to branch off and do their own thing. Dmitri tries to lure out Alex, but unfortunately, Alex doesn't fall for the trap. He chases him down the hallway into this room, and the trap doesn't work. So Dimitri's like, oh shit. So he continues to run down the hallway. And then Boris sees that it doesn't work, and he gets this big shit-eating grin on his face, like, oh, I gotta go help out Dimitri. Basically, what ends up happening from there is Boris accidentally sets off a trap intended for Alex, and he manages to get his hand cut off. So from there, we see Boris get his hand cut off, and then he decides to cauterize the wound by using a pack of matches. And, he's got this stump of a hand. Backtrack just a minute because I did forget a detail. Dimitri, unfortunately, does get killed. Eventually, Alex, the barbarian, tracks him down. He does kill him. And then after that, like I said, Boris cauterizes his hand that was cut off. While this is going on, Alex retrieves the cross and prepares to sacrifice his next victim, which is Peter. We realize Peter somehow managed to survive. We finally we get one last final showdown. And this is a really interesting showdown because we have Ritchie and Anna going down one hallway, trying to confront our main man, Alex the Barbarian. Then we have Boris, who's stumping along with his cauterized hand, and he's limping. And they're all trying to basically kill Alex. Ritchie proceeds to grab a giant rat and set it on fire and he manages to throw it on Alex the Barbarian, and that's what basically kills or almost kills Alex. While this is happening, of course, Boris tries to fight him, but Boris is running around with one hand. He's fucked up, so he unfortunately goes down pretty easily. And while all this is happening, Sonia pops up for one final appearance, and she actually, after she sees her brother basically on fire, she tries to strangle Ritchie, but Anna, saves his life by stabbing Sonia in the neck with a nail file. And basically, we see Alex. He's running after them as he's on fire. And he goes back to this main room, which is kind of like, I guess, a torture room. And while this is happening, downstairs, floor below, we see these two people, these office workers. They're basically having sex in the mailroom. And it's like basically the floor above. And Alex basically goes into this torture room. And I guess the weight of him, and there's all these other bodies in this torture room, the weight manages to collapse. And basically, we see all these bodies collapse onto these two people that are having sex in this mailroom, and we see this big splatter of blood everywhere. From there, we finally cut to Ritchie and Anna. They manage to make it outside. They're greeted by Grozny, the mob boss, and Ritchie gets paid. And he goes, "You didn't tell me those were your family members, and let me just tell you, you got one fucked up family." And he's like, "Here's your cross." And he's like, "Oh, you did a good job. You did a good job." And, Ritchie's pretty pissed off. He didn't, he got sold a bill of goods. He realized that there was a lot more to this job than what Grozny explained. He didn't tell him how fucked up this whole situation was going to be. Grozny says, "Oh, when you get back home, call me. I got more work for you." And Ritchie says, "I'm done with the life, and I'll never do this shit again." And, of course, Grozny goes, "Oh, we'll see, we'll see." And then the script finally, the movie finally ends with Ritchie and Anna, basically walking off into the sunsets. And before Anna goes, "Hey, do you think I'll like Los Angeles?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, you'll love Los Angeles." Now I did miss a couple elements in the film, in the script. As I did that, I realized there were a couple little things that I probably forgot to write down. So I apologize, guys. But I did try to give you the bulk of it without giving too much away, enough to tease you and hopefully get you interested in seeing the film, but not enough to give too much away for you. So that's pretty much our film, Botched. Like I said, guys, this film is a film I don't really normally care about Rotten Tomatoes or any of those things. I was curious because I had really only met one other person that's seen this film. This is a film that really wasn't rated very highly. Not that I take them very seriously, but it's definitely a film that I enjoyed. It's a film that basically is a blood-soaked live action cartoon come to life. It's very much a black comedy mixed with a live action cartoon. Um, I like it because I love horror comedy. I like absurdist comedy. Um, I like stuff like the Three Stooges. This basically reminded me another example. It reminded me of like a Three Stooges movie, effectively with all the different characters and the different wacky personalities. It's not a perfect film, but as far as horror comedies go, I have a lot of affection for this film, and I think the characters really work. And I think what really works for me is the fact that Ritchie, our man, Mr. Dorff, is playing the straight character against all these other characters that are just these wacky characters. And I think it's a film when people talk about horror comedies. I think younger audience nowadays they probably think of stuff like um, Shaun of the Dead, which of course is a fantastic movie. They think of like these modern day horror comedy films, but this one kind of got lost in the mist because it didn't get a really huge theatrical release. It was mostly film festivals, a very limited theatrical release, and then from there it went straight to video for the most part. But I think it's a film that probably, in my opinion, deserves a little more exposure. And the idea of this show, when I started the inception of the show, was to focus on films that don't quite get the attention maybe they deserve. They need more exposure. That was the general premise of this channel when I invented it, when I came up with the idea for it. And obviously, I veer from that every once in a while. I'll talk about a mainstream film or a film that's more popular, but for the most part, I generally tend to stick to that formula for the most part. So this film for me, like I said, it's not perfect, and I can definitely acknowledge that. I do not think it's not that I care about ratings. Again, I know I'm mentioning it, even though I don't care about it, but I don't really care about that stuff. I don't see a 25% at all when I watch this movie. To me, this is a movie that literally it had my attention from the beginning. I hit play all the way up into the end, and it just nonstop. And just when you think you've seen one thing that was so crazy, you don't know what they're going to do to possibly top it next, there's something else that happens that's so ridiculous and so crazy. And you're like, what the fuck did I just watch? Like, how can they top that thing that I just saw? There's just so many ridiculous moments. And our rat friend that I mentioned in that one scene does make an appearance towards the end of the film, too, in a very funny way. For me, this is a movie that, like I said, if you like horror comedy and you like heist films, for me, I give this film a definite way thumbs up. Um, Definitely think check it out. But I've gone off way too long talking. At this point, I want to hear what you have to say, Mr. Korean Cool. Let me know your thoughts on Botched.
Okay, this is weird. First time Korean speaking Russian. It's this movie. Let me just say, when you have a movie that actually throws in a Russian bear mating scene, it's good. It's good stuff, right? Yeah, yeah. Now, I thought the movie it held my interest. It really did. Um, let me start with some of the negatives of what I found with the movie, right? And it is kind of I think it lends itself more to the lack of experience Kit Ryan had, and it goes with the pacing of the movie, right? It starts off great, and when it throws you into the characters, right, and it has its moments of levity, and then it kind of throws it into the overdrive. Like you said, the scene with that Russian dog, I mean rat, that thing was freaking huge. Dragging the head, I started laughing my ass off because it reminded me of that scene in the movie The Thing, where the guy's
Yeah.
like, "You gotta be effing kidding," right? Um, and then it slows down, right? And then you get another moment picked up where people start finding all these crazy stuff going on, and then it'll slow down again, right? And it's like, if you had kept the pace up, I think it would have found a bigger audience,
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the primary negative that I have with this movie. Now let's start with the positives. Or let's finish up with the positives. My bad. I apologize. So Korean cool, alpha male. We are now talking good stuff here. The characters I thought were really well done. And the kills, some very inventive, some not so inventive. But they had their effect, right? Which was like, oh crap. Oh wow, did that just happen? Right? You mentioned it earlier, right? It had a cartoonesque Three Stooges, Abbott Costello feel, like when they see the bad guy. Like poor Yurdy, you mentioned it. Poor Yurdy. He's this little shy, guy. But when it's his turn and they do that running scene down the hallway, oh my, it was like one of the most hilarious things I had seen in a long time because folks, you've seen those scenes, right? They're running away from the killer and they're always looking back. They're always looking back. Where's the killer? He's still 10 feet behind you, dumbass. Keep running. But Yuri, his eyes just look left. They look right. He doesn't turn his head at all. It's like, what are you looking at, dude? And then he bites it. Anna and Ritchie, I thought, you know, when it finally came to, you know, their characters to, they were going to do the romance thing, right? You knew it, right?
Yeah.
But how did it come about? Number one, wow, she loses an ear, folks. She loses an ear. Um, to it's I never thought of it, but it came up with a very inventive way of trying to keep the female counterpart from screaming. Richie just lands a good old, luscious macaroni on her, and they survive. Sonia, dude, psycho woman. Holy cow, psycho. But I think in the end, the story was good. Okay. The humor I thought was great. The sequences I thought were great. Even Dimitri, right? He's this little meek dude going, like you said, an interview. It's his first day there. And he finds himself sitting in a chair with this like 3 foot long blade sitting, shooting up between his lap. Yes, he was not hung like Russian bear, so he survived that, right? But then he turns into a badass.
Yeah.
And then you have Boris, alpha male. Always, it's just, and what made his character is, yeah, he talked his crap, right? He talked his smack, but his facial expressions is like what really,
Yeah.
really like brought his character, you know, to the forefront. Is like, I can believe that, right? Smack talker, and this is what he is. Like he sees, one of the traps fail, and he just instantly turns around and like faces the corner. Oh, look, it's the roof. What happened? What? I didn't know what's going on. He runs into Alex. Oh, that was the other joke, right? It's like, who's trying to kill you? Ivan the Terrible. It's like, come on. Alex is he's on fire, and then Boris comes around, his little nubbin, and he's got this meat cleaver. And then he turns around and his face is like, no. And then he turns around and starts running away himself. And again, the penultimate is a Russian bear mating scene, and then all these dead bodies fall down, and it's just like, of all the bad luck, of all the turn of events, the one break he got, it's like one of the most effed up breaks that you could ever have at a workplace, and they escape. So it finishes it on a high note. Again, I thought the characters, the comedy, the effects, just the little nuances here and there to make it a comedy horror. Yes, eventually weaves its way, out of a heist film, but back into it. Like when he's like, they go looking for this cross, folks.
Yeah.
And then Richie finds it and he pulls it out and finds out it was swapped, right? It's like a little, popsicle taped together cross. And Bortus, alpha male, goes, that's beautiful. He's like, that's not the real one, you idiot. It's like, so it weaves itself back in. But again, I think the biggest harm, and I think it was a self-inflicted wound, was just the pacing, right? There was just it when it picks up, it really picks up, right? It's snappy, it's funny, but then it slows down. It's like, oh, come on, right? Keep with it, right? Because I think for it was about roughly 90 minutes, right? 90,
And maybe about an hour and a half or something, or an hour and a
yeah,
half.
hour and a half film.
Just under it, maybe.
Right.
Yeah,
You feel the pacing, which is unfortunate because I think you're right. I think it's unfair that it got a 25% rating because I don't know who these critics are. I'm sorry. I laughed. It was a first time watch for me. I laughed. I laughed my ass off sometimes.
yeah, no,
Um, it was great, and it had me going back and thinking, wow, it was like an Abbott Costello meets the Wolfman or the Mummy. It
yeah,
was like freaking Evil Dead in some ways. It was like, pretty much almost every other horror comedy you see, like Tucker and Dale, right? Yeah, and where was I at? Yeah, the Abbott Costello meets Mummy, right? All these elements of horror and comedy, I think in the end, if you can forgive the pacing, which I think you should honestly do if you give it a try, folks, and I do recommend it. This was one of those films that again, I hadn't heard of it. Well, I think I heard of it, but for some reason, it just didn't want to see it.
yeah,
But now that I have seen it as a first time watch, yeah, I really dug it.
yeah,
Right? I really dug it. And again, it's just, and even when the horror comedy parts aren't there, right? It's just the simple comedy things, right? Like you mentioned it earlier, right? The elevator scene, right? Peter's standing in there, and then all of a sudden, these three people, three ladies come on, and he looks around like, what did that just happen?
yeah.
And then he's like, ladies, please take next one, right? You wait, we're in
They-
the hurry. You please wait. And then you see he just pauses to hit the hit the open button, and then next you know, two more people come on. He's like, what the hell? What is going? Am I still here? Hello? Am I here? Those little bits. Yuri, again, running down the hallway. We've all seen it, right? Everyone's running, turning their head. It's just his eyes, left, right, while he's running. And then Alex is behind him. Alex himself to go in for kills. This dude not only is psychotic,
yeah,
but apparently is an aspiring um murdering ballerina because he's like
yeah.
jumping in the air,
He's going
twirling. Yeah, he's swinging his Morning Star. Sonia is just again the psycho sister, and again the reveal at the end where you feel Rosny is their brother. You're like, what, dude? What a douche move.
yeah,
Right. What a douche move. You knew what you were setting him up for, and you probably wasn't expecting it, but
yeah,
it works out in the end. It's worth a watch. I do recommend it, right?
yeah,
Forgive the pacing because I watched it again the first time, I think it was several days ago.
yeah,
Enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it. And then
mm,
I went and I watched it a second time.
yeah,
And the pacing on the second watch wasn't as bad, right?
yeah,
It's only because I had seen it a first time.
yeah,
So the first time watch, it is evident, right? And I can forgive all that because I think in the simplistic terms of delivering a comedy horror heist film that has a lot of the elements that you think of, right? Oh, comedy horror. They're not going to show a lot. They show some scenes. It's like, holy crap. Wow, they actually showed that, right? And the bears mating scene,
yeah,
to have a bunch of entrails. Imagine you like, you got your O face on, you got your O face going, and all of a sudden these entrails and blood just land all over you. That's kind of not the nut that you want, right?
yeah.
You don't want that.
No,
So it wraps itself up into a film that I think it's worth having in your collection. It's one of those, you know, it's not a must watch, but you know what? I think I just want to watch it just for something silly, right? And in the end, it is kind of a silly film because wow. I mean, it's what's the saying, right? Oh, what could happen now? Well, shit, you shouldn't ask that question because it does happen, right?
yeah,
Stephen Dorff, Jaime Murray, George Bell, Boris Alpha Male. Do you remember that? Um, they deliver performances. Dimitri, when he goes badass himself, right? It was a fun time as the first
yeah,
watch.
yeah. No, definitely, and that's what I think about when I see this film because I know definitely know what you're talking about as far as the pacing issues goes, but I think this film carries itself. It carries itself on the dialogue because when 'cause I would like if I had to pick anything of heist horror or comedy, I would say honestly it leans into the comedy more than anything, and some of the comedy moments in this film just work so well. Like there's a line where Boris is talking. He's basically introducing himself to the group, and he goes, "I spent 15 years in the army. the best time of my life. I was accused of bullying, cannibalism, and homosexual rape.
Yeah.
I did not do it, of course.
Yeah.
Like
And
there's
then
lines,
yeah,
there's
he's
lines
throwing
like
those
that.
lines out like I'm a badass, but then at the his penultimate scene with Ivan the Terrible, he's I am Boris, alpha male. Please don't call me BB. It's like, come on.
Well, or in the scene right after the one I just described, where he's trying to convince everybody in the group, because at this point everybody's getting to know each other, and he's trying to convince everybody in the group what a badass he is. But he tries to step to Ritchie, and Ritchie's like, "If you take one step closer, I will fucking nail you to the
Yeah.
something along the lines of like, I will fucking demolish you in 2 seconds." And then he goes, "I am stepping back, but
Yes.
it's not because I am afraid."
Yes. It's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's where again I
yeah,
again I can't
yeah,
Kit Ryan, I think he still delivered in turning a totally dark movie into what it became, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, Pacing aside, as you said, right, the dialogue's there, the scenes are there. It still all
yeah,
works, right? But it's just again the pacing
yeah.
between
No,
those
absolutely.
working parts. I think,
Yeah, no, definitely.
used to it, you understand it.
Yeah,
It's still a solid film, right? It's not because the pacing, oh God, it just took me completely out of the scene, or the
yeah, yeah,
pacing totally ruined this storyline. No, it's all there, right? And that's
yeah,
what I thought was solid about the movie is that the
yeah,
storyline held, the characters held, the chain of events held,
yeah.
right? And then, like I said, the big curveball was, bear mating season is going on full swing on top of Xerox Company.
Exactly. Everything pouring down on them. No, it's great. And believe it or not, at the time that this came out, there was a couple different interviews that I read with our director, and there were actually talks about bringing Boris back, and Anna and Botched Steve back for a sequel. But I think the problem was because the thing didn't perform well. Because in all fairness, it was film festivals, a very, very small theatrical window, and basically dumped a video. And because I think it got lost in the mix of so many different horror movies, I think it did get lost in the slew of different direct-to-video releases. Um, I think it underperformed, but I think if it had performed a little better, I think we would have seen a sequel.
Right.
Because
And to it, I mean, you mentioned it to
yeah,
its credit, the screenings they did show, the different film festivals, the audience actually enjoyed the movie,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it is.
So it's not like it was a crap movie. It's a good movie, right? It just has, as most movies
Yeah,
do, some weak points.
always. Yeah, yeah. All right, so I think that wraps up today's episode. Now, guys, for once I'm on the ball because unlike every other fucking episode, I actually wrote down a complete list of podcasts you guys
Holy,
can listen
there it
to.
is. Look at
Not only
that.
did I write the list, but I actually wrote the names of the episodes for the week too, man. I'm staying on top of things this week. Don't expect it all the time, but at least this week. Uh,
John, alpha male.
Alpha male once in his life. The rest of the time, maybe not so much. Before I do that, though, I figure I'm going to let everybody know about our own show, what we got going lined up, guys. So next week, we're going to be joined by Mr. Cupcake himself, Jose from Watch Skip Plus, and also Justin, the Red, the Cinemasochist. We're going to be doing our next Spotlight episode. We're going to be talking about our next Jeff Bridges film. We're going to be talking about a little film that came out in the 90s called Fearless. So that's going to be our Spotlight episode. It's been a while since we've had a chance to do one of those, so I'm pretty excited to get into that world again. And then I'm going to go ahead and announce our next two. We're going with a summer theme. So we're going to be talking the week after that. We're going to be talking about the world of 3 O'Clock High by director Phil Johannou. This is an 80s staple. I think it's a film that a lot of us have seen, but there's quite a few people that I know that haven't seen this one. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to also talk about a film that I think, again, it's a mixture of people that I know that have seen it, but then there's quite a few people that haven't seen this one. And we're going to talk about The Last American Virgin. So we're going to really bring in that school, going with that. Well, not next week per se, but the week after that, we got a whole summer themed school theme, talking about some comedies. And I love talking comedy and two really good ones. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's our next lineup. Now, Fearless, you can watch for free if you download an app called Canopy. That's Kanopy, Canopy. You can download that onto your smart TV or your tablet or your phone, and you can watch that for free. Now, 3 o'clock high and Fast Times, no, excuse me, 3 o'clock high.
What?
I know, I almost said Fast Times because we were talking about Fast Times before we recorded. Anyway, 3 o'clock high, I don't think that's streaming anywhere, unfortunately. So you're probably going to have to rent that. If you Google Last American Virgin, you can find that. It's like I was joking with you. It's like some foreign site. I think it's like a Russian YouTube or something. But they do have the full movie, so you can watch that movie for free. But 3 o'clock high is worth owning in the collection. Shout Factory put out a physical release of the Blu-ray, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Yep. And it's got some extra stuff on there. So if you like those teen comedies, this one's worth picking up for the collection. So that's what we have lined up. So with that, I will announce what shows you guys should be watching. Of course, we have Not a Bomb with Troy and Brad. Every week, they go back and look at films that were either a critical or commercial failure. This week, things are getting super because they're talking about Supergirl. That's right. They're talking about my girlfriend, Helen Slater. I don't mind those older women, man. Ooh, man. Helen Slater, man. Let me just say, Secret of My Success. I love that movie.
Great movie.
You got Michael J. Fox. You got Helen Slater. So they get into the world of Supergirl. So check out Not a Bomb with Troy and Brad. They just dropped that episode on Friday. We have The Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema with Will and Sam. And Will and Sam they give us such a mixture of different films. This month, they're doing Mean Gene Hackman month. They're covering the films of Gene Hackman. And they dropped their newest episode on Monday. And they were talking about the 90s classic with Crimson Tide with Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman. So check that out. Moving along, we have Watch Skip Plus with Jose and Mike the Wildebeest. They're talking about the new film from Celine Song, The Materialists, which I touched on very briefly. That episode, I think, is going to probably be out today or tomorrow. So
it's already out. Yep.
Oh, it is. Okay. I didn't see it before. So check out that. We have my friends Rob and Joe, Caliber 9 from Outer Space. These guys have been on the show a couple times, hoping to get them on in a couple months. Rob and Joe are awesome. And this week, these guys did something a little bit different, which was really cool. They did a homage to the 90s video games, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. They covered both of the movies. And that was a great episode. I listened to that yesterday. So check out Rob and Joe. They give us a nice little drive-in format. We have Raiders of the Podcast with Kevin, Craig, Tyler, and Dave. And this week, they also just dropped an episode today, and they covered 2 classics. They covered This is Spinal Tap, which, by the way, if you're a fan, that's apparently getting a Criterion release in September. They just announced that.
And aren't they talking a sequel?
I think they have a sequel too. Rob Reiner coming back for a sequel. And then they also covered the movie Atlantis. So they're mixing it up a little over at Raiders of the Podcast. Now, the next couple people I'm going to mention are people that I should have been. This is why I should have been writing them down, because I forgot to write them down and I missed them. So I apologize. We have Death by DVD with Harry Scott Sullivan. And Harry has an interesting show with Death by DVD because he does interviews with like indie directors. He has movie trailer compilations of films that you should be watching. And then he actually has regular episodes where he talks about films. So he really mixes it up. And it's a really, really cool little YouTube channel. And then he also has the podcast as well. So definitely check out Death by DVD. And then finally, we have Friends with Cinefits with Alex. Now, Alex used to be on Watch Skip Plus with my buddy Jose. And now he's doing this show, Friends with Cinefits. And the premise is he tries to dive into films that critics either adored. The critics adored, but audiences weren't always on board with. He jokingly says it's the pretentious films. And it's a pretty good little show. I don't know if he's released anything recently because I haven't seen anything on his YouTube. That's a YouTube show, by the way, like ourselves. But he has I think 3 or 4 episodes. And it's a good little show. And each week he also has a guest come on to join him. So definitely check out All those shows, guys, those are all shows that you should be listening to. And I will see everybody, along with my buddy, Mr. Korean Cool here, next week as we get into the world of Fearless. So I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and definitely check out Botched, and check out these other podcasts, guys, because they're all worth your time. I hope everybody has yourself a great weekend, and we will see you guys next time at the movies.